Space, the final frontier where everything is broken, nothing works as it should, and the only things that run on time are bad decisions. Floating amidst this cosmic chaos was the Laughing Gull, a habitat ship that proved humans could make even a vast, empty void feel like a crowded pub on a Friday night. "Scrimshaw, we got company," grumbled Barnacle, who wasn't an actual barnacle but sure looked like he could be related to one. His voice carried the kind of weariness you'd find in a man who'd tried to fix the same problem with duct tape one too many times. Captain Scrimshaw, self-proclaimed scourge of the galaxy and wearer of the gaudiest coat known to mankind, squinted at the ancient monitor. It flickered like it was powered by hopes and dreams. "Company? Well, if it ain't rent collectors, tell him we're out of cash and patience." Barnacle scratched his chin, which was as scruffy as the rest of him. "It's aliens, sir. Got that weird vibe." Scrimshaw's eyes lit up. "Aliens, you say? Well, ain't that just a cosmic joke waiting to happen?" The Laughing Gull wasn't exactly known for its cutting-edge technology. Its controls were about as intuitive as a Rubik's Cube made by an existentialist. But somehow, this hunk of junk had kept them alive through more scrapes than Scrimshaw cared to count. "What do they want?" Scrimshaw asked, leaning over the console and spilling a suspicious-looking drink. It fizzled against the circuitry, adding to the ship's ambience of barely contained chaos. "Can't say," replied Barnacle. "They've been snooping around like a cat that's found a nest of unfriendly birds." Scrimshaw grinned, revealing teeth that had seen better days. "Well, let's show them what they are in for, eh? Full welcoming party." In the heart of this rusty bucket was the crew, a colorful collection of humanity's leftovers. There was Grease, whose name was less about what he did and more about what he always seemed to be covered in. Then there was Sparks, an engineer with a penchant for explosions. She claimed it was the best way to learn. "Captain says we've got aliens sniffing around," Barnacle announced as he barged in, ignoring the sign on the door that read, "Knock, you bastard." Grease wiped his hands on his shirt, not that it helped. "Aliens, eh? Last ones wanted to trade tech tips. Ended up running for their lives when they saw our wiring," Sparks snorted from the back. "They were right to run. That wiring's a death trap." "Exactly," Grease said proudly. "Self-defense mechanism." Scrimshaw's voice crackled over the intercom. "Crew of the Laughing Gull, we got some curious customers. Let's try not to scare them off before we know what they want." The crew gathered in the main bay, a cavernous space filled with crates, cables, and a suspicious amount of empty bottles. The air smelled of adventure, or maybe just neglect. Scrimshaw stood at the front, his coat flaring like a peacock trying too hard. "Now, I know what you're thinking," he began, pacing in front of them. "Aliens usually mean trouble, but sometimes they mean opportunity." "Opportunity to get shot," Sparks muttered. Scrimshaw winked at her. "Or opportunity to shoot back." Their visitor, an alien ship that looked like it had been designed by a committee with severe communication issues, loomed on the screen. It was sleek, shiny, and utterly out of place alongside the Laughing Gull's glorious junkyard aesthetic. "Open a channel," Scrimshaw ordered, his voice the kind of calm that came from a lifetime of wrong choices. "Let's see what this circus is all about." The alien screen flickered to life, revealing a creature that seemed to have more limbs than it knew what to do with. Its eyes darted nervously, like it had just walked into a room full of tax auditors. "Greetings, humans," it said in a voice that was both melodic and unsettlingly high-pitched. "We are the Zergak, we come in peace." Scrimshaw raised an eyebrow. "Peace? That's a new one. Most folks show up here looking for a fight or a refund." He leaned closer to the screen, scrutinizing the alien like a man trying to find a cockroach in a salad. "We've heard of your creativity," said the Zergak, choosing its words like a bomb disposal expert cutting wires. "Is that what they are calling it now?" Sparks whispered to Grease, who shrugged. Scrimshaw crossed his arms, trying to look intimidating despite the fact he was wearing what could only be described as fashion vomit. "What do you want from us?" The Zergak hesitated, its limbs twitching. "We seek inspiration." "Inspiration," Scrimshaw laughed, a sound like a rusty hinge. "From us, By the stars, you're in the wrong part of the galaxy. We have observed your actions from afar, the Zergek explained with all the enthusiasm of an accountant explaining tax law. Your ability to adapt and innovate in dire situations is intriguing. Barnacle leaned over to Sparks. I think they mean we're good at not dying. That's a talent, Sparks nodded. Scrimshaw stroked his chin, pondering this unexpected development. So, you want to learn how to make a floating disaster work. The Zergek bobbed its head, or maybe that was a tremor. Precisely. We believe your approach could benefit our people. Well, who am I to deny the galaxy some human ingenuity, Scrimshaw declared, throwing his arms wide like a preacher at a particularly enthusiastic sermon. Grease rolled his eyes. We're not exactly poster kids for survival. Maybe not, Scrimshaw admitted. But we've got something they don't. What's that? Barnacle asked, genuinely curious. Scrimshaw's smile was as crooked as his moral compass. Optimism, and a healthy disregard for safety regulations. The alien ship docked awkwardly, like a first date that's gone horribly wrong but neither side wants to admit it. The Zergek emerged, a jittery mass of limbs and anxiety. Welcome to the Laughing Gull, Scrimshaw announced with a flourish, as if he were presenting the galaxy's most exclusive club instead of a space-bound scrapyard. The Zergek looked around, their eyes wide with what might have been horror or amazement. It was hard to tell. This is different, one of them said, struggling to keep its tone positive. Different is what we do best, Sparks said. Right before we fix things, or blow them up, Grease added helpfully. Scrimshaw clapped his hands together. Let's show our guests what we're made of. The crew set about their work, showcasing their unique brand of human resourcefulness, which usually involved a lot of noise, some mild explosions, and a disregard for personal safety. The Zergek watched, taking notes like eager students or terrified witnesses. Hours passed in a blur of activity. The aliens learned about duct tape, the universal fix, and WD-40, the universal solvent. They learned the human art of improvisation and the delicate balance of swearing at inanimate objects. As the day wound down, the Zergek seemed both fascinated and bewildered. We have much to learn, their leader admitted. Your methods are unconventional but effective. That's humanity for you, Scrimshaw said, making it up as we go along and hoping for the best. The Zergek nodded, perhaps understanding that in the chaos of the cosmos, sometimes the best plan was the one you stumbled upon accidentally. As they prepared to leave, one of the Zergek hesitated. Captain Scrimshaw, may we return for further study? Scrimshaw chuckled, a dark, mirthful sound. Depends, you planning on bringing any more of that piece? We're running low. The Zergek offered a strange, multi-limbed gesture that might have been a bow. We will bring curiosity. Curiosity's good, Scrimshaw replied. Just try not to blow anything up. That's our job. As the Zergek ship departed, the crew of the Laughing Gull watched, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over them like the dust in the corners they never quite reached. Think they'll come back? Barnacle asked, sipping something that was probably flammable. If they don't, they'll miss out, Grease said, wiping his hands on his shirt again. We're the best show in the galaxy. The only show, Sparks corrected, leaning against the bulkhead with a smirk. Scrimshaw gazed at the stars, a universe of possibilities stretching before him. Well, folks, it seems we've made an impression. And as the Laughing Gull drifted through space, held together by haphazard repairs and the indomitable spirit of its crew, one thing was certain. They'd be laughing all the way to the cosmic bank. What's next, Captain? Sparks asked, a glint of mischief in her eye. Scrimshaw shrugged. Whatever comes our way, and if it doesn't come, we'll go find it. With that, the Laughing Gull continued its journey, a testament to human resilience, and a warning to any who thought space was ready for them. Another batch of peace-loving aliens, Sparks grumbled, rolling her eyes as the ancient monitor sputtered to life again, revealing a new contact. The screen was as reliable as an interstellar weather forecast. Glordock, they call themselves this time, Barnacle announced, scratching his chin thoughtfully, dislodging something that could have been a small ecosystem. Sounds like a fungal infection. Scrimshaw leaned against the console, his gaudy coat sweeping the sticky floor with a flourish only he could muster without irony. Let's hear what they want. Maybe it's something new. Or maybe they just want a refund on this part of the universe. Commander Zoltran here. A voice boomed through the speakers, carrying the kind of authority usually reserved for tax inspectors or school principals. The screen revealed a face that seemed to have been carved from granite but with less personality. We're interested in a mutually beneficial trade agreement. Trade, huh? Scrimshaw mused, his grin a little too wide like a shark considering lunch. What do you got? We're fresh out of plasma guns and good intentions. Zoltran's stone-like visage didn't flinch. We seek something unique to your species. Hope it's not hygiene, Grease murmured, futilely wiping his hands on his perpetually filthy overalls. Scrimshaw, ever the showman, gestured grandly to his crew, the Laughing Gull's very own cabinet of curiosities. Unique is what we do best. Care to be more specific, Commander? The Glordok's eyes, small and too shiny, betrayed nothing. We have heard of your humor. That got a laugh from Grease, a short, barking sound like a sick dog. Humor. You want jokes? Zoltran tilted his head, a movement almost as expressive as a sneeze. Precisely. We have identified human humor as a potential tool. Tool, huh? Sparks said, raising an eyebrow. Like a wrench or a bomb, Barnacle snorted. I didn't know slapstick was a strategic resource. Scrimshaw nodded sagely, as if he were considering a complex chess move. Humor's tricky business, Commander. Might blow up in your face if you're not careful. That risk is acceptable, Zoltran replied in a tone suggesting he'd never laughed in his life. We propose an exchange. Your humor techniques for our advanced nanotech. Scrimshaw's eyes lit up like a carnival. Nanotech, you say? That could spruce up this old bird. Or destroy it faster, Sparks added, ever the optimist. Barnacle leaned over, whispering with a voice like gravel in a blender. You think they're serious about this humor thing? Scrimshaw shrugged. Either that or they're planning the galaxy's worst open mic night. Zoltran waited with the patience of a rock formation. We can send representatives to study your interactions. Study, huh? Scrimshaw rubbed his chin, contemplating the cosmic joke unfolding before him. You know Glordok humor isn't just jokes, it's a lifestyle. Sounds like you're trying to upsell them, Grease muttered. Scrimshaw ignored him. How do you propose to, study this? Our observers will integrate into your crew, learn your ways, Zoltran intoned. In return, we offer the nanotech as a gesture of goodwill. Goodwill's overrated, Sparks said. But nanotech is interesting. It's a deal then, Scrimshaw declared, with all the flourish of a salesman closing a particularly dubious deal. Welcome to the Laughing Gull, where the drinks are questionable and the jokes are deadly. The Glordok ship docked with the kind of precision that suggested they hadn't yet experienced the joys of space turbulence. 3 observers disembarked, their expressions, or lack thereof, suggesting they'd wandered into an improv night by mistake. Welcome to our humble abode, Scrimshaw greeted them, spreading his arms in a grand gesture that nearly knocked over Barnacle. Watch your step. The floor's not level. The Glordok leader, a creature of angles and awkwardness, nodded solemnly. We look forward to understanding your methods. Methods? Sparks snorted. We're more about madness here. Grease eyed the newcomers with suspicion. Better if they learn to duck, fast. The Glordok observers seemed confused, which was understandable given the mess they'd walked into. We wish to begin our study immediately, their leader announced, jotting down notes with a pen that looked more like a weapon. Barnacle grinned, his teeth a patchwork of neglect and bad decisions. Well, you're in luck. We're about to enter the fun zone. The so-called fun zone turned out to be a maintenance bay that looked like it had hosted a brawl between a scrapyard and an oil spill. Sparks was at the center of it, jury-rigging a piece of machinery that might have been a coffee maker in another life. First lesson, she said, waving a wrench like a conductor. Always have a plan B, preferably one that doesn't involve blowing a hole in the ship. The Glordok observer nodded, pen scratching against tablet. And what is the purpose of this device? Purpose, Sparks grinned. "It's supposed to make coffee. But right now, it's giving us a light show and a sense of impending doom." Grease chimed in, wiping his hands on his shirt again. "Plan B is usually switching it off and hoping for the best." "Noted," the Glordock mumbled, looking more bewildered by the second. Meanwhile, Scrimshaw had taken it upon himself to give a grand tour of the Laughing Gull's finer points. "And over here," he gestured towards a wall covered in scorch marks, "is a testament to our creativity with explosives." "Explosives?" the Glordock queried, eyes narrowing slightly. Scrimshaw winked. "Oh, just a little fun with mining charges. You never know when you'll need a quick exit." The Glordock observer jotted down more notes, likely contemplating the fine line between humor and insanity that these humans seemed to dance along. Hours went by, the Glordock learning, or attempting to learn, the intricacies of human humor, which to them seemed as elusive as a coherent government policy. "So you see," Scrimshaw explained, holding up a rubber chicken he'd found somewhere, "humor's about surprise, like finding this in your bed." The Glordock blinked slowly, jotting down rubber poultry in their notes. "And this is amusing. Depends on context," Barnacle added, slapping a hand on Scrimshaw's shoulder. "Or how tired you are." At the end of the day, the Glordock were escorted back to their ship, looking like they'd just survived an alien abduction, which in a way they had. "Will your people be using this humor as a weapon?" Scrimshaw asked, more out of curiosity than concern. Zoltran, waiting at the airlock, considered this. "Not a weapon, a tool for negotiation, perhaps. Disarmament through disarming wit." "Well, good luck with that," Sparks said, waving them off. "And remember, timing is everything." With that, the Glordock ship undocked, leaving the Laughing Gull and its crew to their own devices, literally and figuratively. As they drifted further into the void, Barnacle leaned back, a satisfied look on his face. "Think we taught them anything useful?" Scrimshaw shrugged, sipping something that could probably power a small generator. "If nothing else, they learned that human humor's about survival. Laugh or die trying." "Well, we're not dead yet," Grease said, wiping his hands on a rag that might have once been white. "Not yet," Sparks agreed, adjusting the controls with more hope than certainty. Scrimshaw gazed out at the stars, a cosmic tapestry of possibilities and pitfalls. "To whatever comes next, then." And as the Laughing Gull sailed through the chaos of space, one thing was certain: they'd keep laughing, for better or worse. The Laughing Gull drifted lazily through space, a battered tin can barely clinging to the semblance of purpose. Inside, Captain Scrimshaw shuffled cards at a table that looked like it had hosted more fistfights than dinners. Nearby, Barnacle was busy rearranging his personal collection of junk, which, judging by the smell, had been curated over several decades with the utmost neglect. "Do you ever wonder if we're making a difference?" Barnacle asked, scratching his chin and sending another flurry of dust into the air. "Or are we just cosmic cockroaches, scuttling from one mess to another?" Scrimshaw glanced up, eyeing the pile of dubious treasures. "Difference? Hell, we're lucky if we make it to lunch without a hull breach. But who else can say they taught humor to a bunch of aliens?" "Assuming they learned anything," Barnacle grumbled, poking at a rusty sprocket with a stick. "Pretty sure Zoltran thought the rubber chicken was a deadly weapon." Scrimshaw chuckled, shuffling the cards with a flourish that left a few fluttering to the floor. "To be fair, he's not wrong. That thing's seen some action." Meanwhile, Sparks was deep in conversation with Grease in the engine room, or as they called it, the Heart of Darkness. It was an appropriate name. The engines groaned and wheezed like a dying beast, and every surface was coated with a film of grime that had achieved sentience and was considering unionizing. "You think the Glordock actually got a kick out of our little comedy routine?" Sparks asked, tightening a bolt that seemed intent on escaping to a better life. Grease shrugged, smudging another streak of oil across his forehead. "Who knows?" They looked like they were having an existential crisis, which, in fairness, is the appropriate response to most of our jokes. Sparks grinned. "Well, if they find humor a threat, maybe laughter really is the best defense. Who needs shields when you've got a killer punchline? Over in the galley, Scrimshaw had gathered the crew for an impromptu meeting. The air was thick with the smell of dubious cuisine, something between burnt toast and engine exhaust. "All right, listen up," Scrimshaw announced, gesturing with a spatula that had seen better days. "The Glordock are still trying to wrap their heads around human humor. They're sending a transmission later today to continue their study." Barnacle raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll be back for more lessons on how not to blow up their ship with a whoopee cushion?" Scrimshaw chuckled, serving up plates of questionable stew. "Possibly. And speaking of potential explosions, I've decided we should host a comedy night. You know, show off our best material," Sparks snorted. "You mean the kind of material that would make a funeral dirge sound like a nursery rhyme?" "Exactly," Scrimshaw said, flashing a grin that promised either mischief or disaster. "Besides, what could go wrong?" Grease muttered from behind a spoonful of stew. "Famous last words." By the time the Glordock signal came through, the laughing Gull was abuzz with barely suppressed chaos. Scrimshaw had even managed to rig up a stage of sorts, using what might have been a table and a couple of crates that used to store parts nobody could identify. The screen flickered to life, or something approximating life, revealing Commander Zoltran's granite-like visage. "Greetings, Captain Scrimshaw. We are prepared to continue our study of human humor." Scrimshaw beamed at the screen. "Perfect timing, Zoltran. We're just about to start an interstellar comedy night. Consider yourselves our guests of honor." Barnacle leaned over to whisper, "You sure this is a good idea?" Scrimshaw shrugged. "Nope. But when has that ever stopped us?" The Glordock on their ship were ready to observe, pens poised like weapons of mass confusion. As Scrimshaw began, the crew took turns at the mic, delivering jokes that ranged from dark wit to utter nonsense. Barnacle took the stage first, clearing his throat like a landslide. "Why did the black hole break up with the star? It needed some space." There was a palpable silence before the crew erupted into laughter. The Glordock observers on their screens blinked in slow, synchronized confusion. Next up was Sparks. "How many engineers does it take to fix a light bulb on this ship?" "None, because it's never been done." Reese chuckled, elbowing a silent Glordock on the screen. "She's not wrong." The show went on, each joke more absurd and cryptic than the last. The humans laughed, and the Glordock scribbled notes furiously, as if trying to decode some arcane magic spell. But it was Scrimshaw's grand finale that really sealed the deal. He stepped up, holding the rubber chicken like a sacred relic. "Why did the chicken cross the universe? To prove time and space aren't the only things that can be warped." The crew erupted into chaotic laughter, clapping and banging on tables. But on the Glordock ship, things were less jovial. The observers exchanged looks of growing alarm, whispering among themselves as if they'd just witnessed a tactical demonstration. "Captain," Zoltran's voice came through again, a hint of concern edging into his granite tone. "We did not anticipate the potency of your humor. We must reconsider our strategy." Scrimshaw grinned broadly. "Don't tell me we've weaponized comedy." Zoltran hesitated, visibly uncomfortable for the first time. "There is potential risk involved." "That's our motto," Sparks chimed in. "Risk it all for a cheap laugh." Barnacle leaned back, arms crossed. "So, humor's a threat now." "Wait till they hear us sing." The transmission ended with Zoltran promising to confer with his council, leaving the laughing Gull crew to celebrate their unintentional triumph. As the night wound down, Scrimshaw stood surveying his crew, a sense of satisfaction tinged with the usual uncertainty hovering around him. "Well, folks, looks like we've proven that laughter really is the best defense." Barnacle looked thoughtful, a rare expression for him. "Or at least the best way to confuse the hell out of an alien species." "Think they'll come back?" Grease asked, wiping his hands on his perpetually filthy overalls. Scrimshaw shrugged, pouring another dubious drink. "Maybe. Though I suspect they've got some serious strategizing to do first. Just means more time for us to polish our act," Sparks said with a wink. As the laughing gull drifted through the void, one thing was clear. They had turned the galaxy's oldest tool into its newest weapon. It was a heady feeling, knowing they'd left the Glordock reconsidering their approach to humanity. But as always, there was a lingering question of what came next. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and occasionally laughed back. But as long as they had jokes and questionable drinks, the crew of the Laughing Gull figured they'd muddle through. Later, as they all settled into their bunks, Barnacle voiced a thought that had been nagging at the edges of the room. "You think humor really is the best weapon?" Scrimshaw chuckled from his hammock, the springs creaking ominously. "Only if your enemy's got to stick up there." "Well, you get the idea," Sparks piped up, her voice tinged with a wry smile. "And if they don't, you can always hit them with the rubber chicken." The ship settled into a comfortable rhythm, the hum of the engines masking the sounds of space groaning around them. Humor might not solve all their problems, but it certainly made them easier to ignore. As sleep claimed the crew one by one, the Laughing Gull continued its journey. The ship, battered but unbeaten, floated through the darkness, leaving behind a trail of laughter echoing silently in the void. And somewhere, out there in the inky depths, the Glordock were trying to figure out how to arm a joke. The morning after the Laughing Gull's comedy night was as bright as a hangover in a coal mine. Grease rolled out of his cot with the grace of a drunken giraffe, muttering under his breath about the ship's smell, which had taken on a new identity since the stew incident. He found Sparks already in the heart of darkness, her nose buried in a manual so outdated it might have chronicled the invention of fire. "Any chance the engines are gonna start purring instead of wheezing?" Grease asked, slumping into a chair that squeaked like it was confessing a crime. Sparks looked up, smirking. "Sure, right after they invent a patch for stupidity. Until then, we're stuck with this symphony of despair." Above them, the ancient monitor flickered to life again, displaying a message from Commander Zoltran. The Glordocks had been busy, it seemed. They were determined to crack the code of human humor, convinced it held some secret power. The message was dripping with enough formality to fill a bureaucrat's wet dream. "Greetings, most honored purveyors of humor," Zoltran's voice intoned, sounding like he was reading from a script written by a lawyer. "We have attempted to synthesize your comedic output and request further clarification." "Sounds like they're about to write a thesis," Grease muttered, flipping a switch that probably did nothing useful. Sparks chuckled. "Bet they end up with a headache. Or maybe they're just trying to weaponize knock-knock jokes." Back in the cluttered mess hall, Scrimshaw was nursing a cup of something that legally couldn't be called coffee. Barnacle was sitting nearby, rummaging through his box of treasures with the enthusiasm of someone searching for lost socks. "You reckon the Glordocks are taking notes from last night?" Barnacle asked, holding up a piece of metal that looked suspiciously like a fork. Scrimshaw shrugged, a grin playing at the corners of his mouth. "Probably plotting how to deploy a whoopee cushion in a diplomatic meeting." "I mean, if they can laugh their way into peace talks, who are we to judge? Imagine the scandal. Intergalactic summit disrupted by a fart joke," Barnacle said, shaking his head. Just then, the monitor in the mess hall blinked insistently, and Zoltran's face filled the screen. His expression was as stiff as his uniform, which was saying something. "Captain Scrimshaw," Zoltran began, each word enunciated like he was teaching the alphabet to a particularly dense child. "We have attempted to replicate your humor using our own systems." "How's that going for you?" Scrimshaw asked, taking a sip of his faux coffee, which tasted like bitter regret. There was a pause, and then Zoltran continued, "Our attempts have had unintended consequences. A select team of our analysts experienced an overwhelming sense of what humans might describe as hilarity. They are currently incapacitated," Barnacle snorted. "Guess they found your jokes too much to handle," Scrimshaw chuckled. "And here I thought we were just trying to get a laugh, not start a revolution." Zoltran's eyes narrowed slightly, a rare sign of emotion from the granite-faced leader. "We require further clarification of your methods. It is imperative we understand this." "Weapon, weapon," Scrimshaw feigned innocence, though there was a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "We call it comedy, come standard with sarcasm and a touch of irony." In the heart of darkness, Sparks and Grease were busy coordinating with the crew, preparing for another potential communication disaster. Sparks had rigged up a few more improvements to their ancient monitor, which now looked like a Frankenstein's monster of cables and duct tape. "Any bets on how this ends?" Grease asked, wiping sweat from his brow with a rag that used to be a shirt. Sparks smirked, adjusting a dial that probably controlled nothing important. "Either they'll explode from laughter or implode from confusion. Either way, we're in for a fireworks show." "More like a light show with a side of existential dread," Grease replied, giving a console a kick that somehow made things worse. Scrimshaw's voice crackled over the intercom, summoning all hands to the bridge. There was a sense of urgency, mixed with that familiar undercurrent of chaos that was the Laughing Gull's unofficial atmosphere. When the crew assembled, Scrimshaw paced before them like a general about to lead his troops into a very confusing battle. "All right, folks. The Glordocs are on the edge of a nervous breakdown, trying to figure out if our jokes are a new form of psychological warfare." Barnacle raised an eyebrow. "And we're supposed to help them how?" "By doing what we do best," Scrimshaw said, grinning like a cat with a particularly juicy canary. "We're gonna give them the full human experience." Sparks crossed her arms, leaning against a console that groaned in protest. "You mean we're gonna keep telling jokes until they surrender?" "Exactly," Scrimshaw exclaimed, spreading his arms wide. "Who knew winning a war could be this fun?" Grease chuckled, rubbing his hands together. "This is gonna be one hell of a show." And so the crew of the Laughing Gull prepared their grand plan. They would showcase the absurdity, the sarcasm, and the sheer irreverence that defined human humor. If the Glordocs wanted a demonstration, they'd get one. Whether they'd understand it was another matter entirely. The screen blinked to life again, Zoltran's stern face filling the bridge. "Captain Scrimshaw, we await your assistance in comprehending this phenomenon." Scrimshaw took a deep breath, stepping forward with the confidence of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Commander Zoltran, prepare your crew for a crash course in Earth's finest comedic traditions." Barnacle stood beside him, ready to deliver the opening act. "Why don't aliens eat clowns? Because they taste funny." The crew burst into laughter, but on the Glordoc ship, the reaction was more muted. Zoltran's expression flickered with the faintest hint of confusion, a monumental shift given his usual stoicism. Sparks followed up quickly, her delivery as sharp as the tools she wielded in the engine room. "What do you call an alien with 3 eyes?" "An alien." Even Grease got in on the action, though his humor was more macabre. "How many spacers does it take to fly a ship?" "None, if they're spaced out." The Glordocs were struggling. Their screens filled with analysts attempting to maintain their composure, but cracks were forming in their stoic facades. The human crew delighted in the visible disarray, finding strength in the shared experience of laughter. Scrimshaw took the stage again, delivering the final punchline with the gravity of a seasoned performer. "Why did the spaceship refuse to land? It needed some space to think." The Laughing Gull crew erupted into raucous applause, banging on consoles and hooting with delight. But on the Glordoc ship, it was chaos. Analysts were hastily jotting down notes, trying to make sense of the madness. Zoltran's granite demeanor was visibly chipped, his eyes wide with a mixture of bewilderment and grudging admiration. As the transmission ended, Scrimshaw leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Well, folks, looks like we've got them on the ropes." Who knew slapstick and sarcasm could be so effective? Barnacle chuckled, shaking his head. "We're the galaxy's greatest comedians or its biggest clowns." Grease nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Either way, we've shown them there's more to humanity than meets the eye." As the crew disbanded, laughter echoed through the corridors of the Laughing Gull, a testament to the indomitable spirit that had carried them through thick and thin. They'd found power in their humor, a weapon more potent than any they'd wielded before. Scrimshaw watched his crew with a sense of pride, knowing they'd faced an enemy not with guns but with grins and giggles. The Glordox might not understand them, but they'd think twice before underestimating the power of a good joke. Later, as the ship drifted into the quiet of space, Barnacle sat with Scrimshaw, pondering their next move. "You think they'll come around? Understand what we're doing here?" Scrimshaw shrugged, the weight of leadership momentarily forgotten. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll just keep scratching their heads until they wear a hole through their skulls," Barnacle snorted. "As long as they keep watching, we'll keep performing." "Exactly," Scrimshaw replied. "We've made them see us, really see us. And if they don't get it, that's their problem, not ours." The lights dimmed as night fell on the ship, the crew settling into a semblance of peace. They'd faced the darkness and laughed in its face, carving out a place for themselves in a universe that was vast, uncaring, and sometimes just plain silly. As the laughing Gull sailed on, its crew drifted into dreams filled with punchlines and pratfalls, ready to face whatever came next. For in their hearts they knew the truth, that no matter what the cosmos threw their way, they'd face it with a smile, a laugh, and maybe even a rubber chicken. And somewhere out there, the Glordox were left to ponder the mysteries of humor, their strategy sessions punctuated by the occasional snicker, a sound that might just change the course of history. The laughing Gull drifted through the void like a bad punchline waiting for a setup. The crew, once buoyed by their comedic victory over the Glordox, now found themselves collectively staring into the metaphorical abyss of interstellar uncertainty. It was as if someone had told them the universe was just one big cosmic joke, and they couldn't quite figure out the punchline. Barnacle sat in the mess hall, fiddling with a broken toaster, which had somehow found its way into his treasure trove. "You ever get the feeling the universe is just one big sitcom and we're the laugh track?" he asked, glancing at Grease, who was tinkering with a cup of questionable instant noodles. Grease snorted. "Sitcom, more like a cosmic soap opera. Next thing you know, we'll find out Captain Scrimshaw's actually an alien in disguise." "Would explain his taste in drinks," Barnacle muttered, eyeing Scrimshaw's mug of faux coffee with a mix of suspicion and pity. The captain himself was in his quarters, staring at a digital calendar that blinked with reminders and reports, all equally grim. A captain's lot, he mused, was to be less of a navigator and more of a juggler, except all the balls were on fire, and the audience was as forgiving as a black hole. Sparks entered, her usual sarcasm momentarily subdued by the weight of the situation. "You look like a man trying to decipher a map with no X marks the spot," Scrimshaw sighed, rubbing his temples. "Maps are easy. It's the crew that's the real puzzle." "You mean the crew that's questioning whether or not we're all going to be vaporized by a bunch of aliens who just don't get the joke," Sparks replied, arms crossed like she was bracing for impact. "Yeah, that crew," Scrimshaw said, leaning back in his chair. "It's like trying to keep a party going when everyone's got one foot out the door. Maybe it's time for new strategy." "You know, something other than hitting them with a barrage of dad jokes," Sparks suggested, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Scrimshaw chuckled despite himself. "If only I had a manual for this sort of thing," Sparks shrugged. "I could lend you one of mine, but they are all about ancient engines that break more than they fix." "Sounds about right," Scrimshaw said, his grin fading into something more serious. "But really, Sparks, do you think we can actually pull this off? I'm starting to feel like we're just playing pretend, hoping for a miracle that'll never come." "You doubt me, Captain?" Sparks raised an eyebrow. "No, never doubt you, just everything else," Scrimshaw replied. "You ever feel like the universe is sitting on your chest?" Sparks nodded. "Pretty much every day. But you know what they say, if it wasn't hard, everyone would do it." "Yeah, but they don't mention that the hard bit might include getting disintegrated by aliens because our jokes didn't land," Scrimshaw said, shaking his head. "Then we better up our game, Captain. Maybe throw in some slapstick," Sparks suggested, her sense of humor returning. Meanwhile, in the heart of darkness, the engine room was living up to its name, with more smoke and clattering than a haunted house on Halloween. Grease was elbows deep in machinery, muttering to himself like a man who'd just found out his car had joined a union. Barnacle joined him, waving away the acrid fumes. "Smells like you're cooking up something special here." "Special's one word for it," Grease grumbled, pausing to wipe his hands. "This ship's held together with hope and duct tape. More of the latter, honestly." "Think we'll make it through this mess?" Barnacle asked, half out of curiosity, half out of desperation for a positive answer. Grease shrugged. "Depends if we're talking about the engines or the crew. Either way, it might just be a lost cause." "Comforting thought," Barnacle replied, picking up a wrench. "But I guess there's nothing like imminent doom to sharpen the senses." "Or dull them to the point of numbness," Grease said, tightening a bolt that refused to cooperate. "I've been in worse spots, but not by much." Back on the bridge, Scrimshaw faced his crew, their expressions a mixture of hope, fear, and the kind of fatigue that only comes with trying to teach aliens the finer points of slapstick comedy. "All right, team," Scrimshaw began, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We've given the Glordocs a taste of Earth humor, and it's safe to say they're not quite ready to host Saturday Night Live." Barnacle raised a hand. "So what's next? More jokes? Maybe a musical number?" "Not unless you want to risk the universe imploding from our off-key singing," Sparks chimed in, earning a chuckle from Grease. "Truth is," Scrimshaw continued, "we're in a bit of a bind. The Glordocs aren't just confused, they're starting to get suspicious. And suspicious aliens aren't exactly known for their sunny dispositions." Grease leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So, what's our next move? Surrender and hope they go easy on us?" "Not exactly my style," Scrimshaw replied, a glint of defiance in his eye. "We need to show them that humor isn't just about cheap laughs. It's about connection, understanding, and maybe a little bit of chaos," Sparks snorted. "Chaos we can do. Understanding, well, that's a work in progress." "Then we keep at it," Scrimshaw said, standing tall. "We remind them and ourselves that laughter might not save the world, but it sure makes the time pass quicker while we try." The crew nodded, though the questions lingered in the air like smoke from a smoldering fire. Could they really make a difference with nothing more than jokes and a battered spaceship? Was the Glordoc threat too great to overcome with humor and wit alone? As they pondered, the ship's ancient monitor flickered to life, Commander Zoltran's face appearing with all the warmth of a glacier. His expression was unreadable, a mask of stoicism that betrayed nothing of his thoughts. "Captain Scrimshaw," Zoltran intoned, his voice as flat as a deflated balloon, "we have reviewed the recordings of your comedic transmissions. While our analysts continue to study them, it seems there is a growing sentiment among our people that your humor might be more dangerous than we anticipated." "Should I be flattered or worried?" Scrimshaw quipped, though his mind raced at the implications. Zoltran did not smile, he rarely did. "It is neither a compliment nor a threat, Captain, merely an observation. Your humor has unsettled some of our council members." Barnacle shot a look at Scrimshaw, eyebrows raised. "Unsettled, huh? Maybe they just need to lighten up." Scrimshaw nodded, addressing Zoltran. "Commander, perhaps we can offer a live demonstration. Something more interactive to help bridge the gap." Zoltran's brow furrowed. "What do you propose, Captain?" "A live comedy night," Scrimshaw replied, grinning. "We'll invite your analysts aboard, show them one of our finest performances. Let them see the magic firsthand." Sparks and Grease exchanged dubious looks, but neither voiced the concerns bubbling beneath the surface. Zoltran paused, considering. "Very well, Captain. We shall send a delegation to witness your performance." The transmission cut out, leaving the crew in uncomfortable silence. Scrimshaw turned to his crew, his expression a mix of determination and doubt. "All right, this is our chance," he said, clapping his hands together. "We show them what we're made of. Who's ready to give the performance of a lifetime?" Grease shrugged. "Guess it's time to see if laughter really is the best medicine, or if we're just terminal." Barnacle grinned, the tension easing slightly. "I'll dig out my best props, maybe even find a rubber chicken." Sparks smirked. "As long as you don't find a whoopee cushion. Those things are the real weapons of mass destruction." Scrimshaw chuckled, though the weight of their task was ever present in his thoughts. This comedy night was more than a performance. It was a last-ditch effort to prove humanity's worth, to show that even in the darkest of times, humor could be a beacon of hope. The crew set to work, transforming the Laughing Gull's mess hall into a makeshift comedy club. The lighting was terrible, the sound system even worse, but it was theirs. They decorated the space with whatever they could find: streamers made from old wiring, tables covered in mismatched tablecloths, and a stage assembled from bits of scrap metal. As the hours ticked by, the crew rehearsed their material, trying to ignore the nerves that gnawed at them like rats in the walls. They knew that this was more than just a show. It was a gamble, a desperate bid to win over an audience that didn't quite understand them. When the Glordock delegation finally arrived, their imposing figures were met with smiles and tentative waves from the crew. The aliens, in all their stiff, humorless glory, took their seats, surveying the scene with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Scrimshaw took the stage, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced at his crew, each one offering a nod of encouragement. This was it, the moment they'd been working towards. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins, "welcome to the first intergalactic comedy night aboard the Laughing Gull. We promise you an evening of laughter, confusion, and maybe a little bit of chaos." The Glordocks shifted in their seats, their expressions unreadable. Scrimshaw pressed on, telling jokes that might have seemed mundane to a human audience, but took on a new layer of complexity when directed at their alien guests. Barnacle followed, his prop comedy earning a few tentative chuckles from the Glordocks, while Sparks and Grease delivered a sharp-witted banter that highlighted the absurdity of life aboard a ship held together by sheer willpower. As the night wore on, the atmosphere began to shift. The Glordocks, initially reserved and wary, seemed to relax, their rigid postures softening. They even attempted a few laughs, though it sounded more like a cough or a hiccup than anything resembling humor. Scrimshaw watched with a mix of relief and pride. Maybe, just maybe, they were getting somewhere. Maybe humor really was universal, a bridge between worlds and cultures. As the final act concluded, the Glordocks rose to leave, their expressions contemplative. Zoltran approached Scrimshaw, his demeanor slightly less frosty than usual. "Captain," he said, meeting Scrimshaw's gaze, "your performance was illuminating. There is much for us to consider." Scrimshaw nodded, unable to fully suppress the hope blooming in his chest. "Glad you enjoyed the show, Commander. We aim to please." Zoltran inclined his head in a gesture that might have been respect. "Until we meet again, Captain." As the Glordocks departed, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief, their laughter ringing through the ship like a balm for weary souls. Scrimshaw turned to his crew, a grin spreading across his face. "Well, folks, I think we did it. We might not have changed the universe, but we gave it a good laugh." Barnacle chuckled, clapping Scrimshaw on the back. "Here's to the galaxy's greatest comedians, or its biggest fools." Grease rolled his eyes, but the smile was genuine. "Either way, we gave them something to think about." Sparks nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Guess we'll just have to wait and see if laughter really is the best weapon." As the crew celebrated their small victory, the Laughing Gull sailed on through the stars, a testament to the power of humor and the indomitable spirit of those who dared to laugh in the face of the unknown. For now, they had survived, armed with nothing more than jokes and a battered spaceship. And in the vastness of space, that was something worth celebrating. "All right, folks, the good news is, we got through the comedy night without triggering an interstellar war," Scrimshaw announced, leaning against the mess hall's crumbling wall, which was currently doubling as a stage backdrop. "The bad news is, our main act was so bad, it's probably going to be the subject of alien conspiracy theories for decades." Barnacle chuckled from his perch on one of the tables, which creaked ominously under his weight. "I hear they are already calling it the Great Galactic Guffaw Incident." Grease snorted, swirling a questionable-looking beverage that masqueraded as coffee. Yeah, well, as long as they don't call us the humanity's last laugh. Sparks stood off to the side, tinkering with a small mechanical device that could have been a toaster in another life. So what's the plan, Captain? We can't keep relying on slapstick to save our skins. Before Scrimshaw could respond, Jester, the ship's resident strategist and chaos enthusiast, burst into the room, eyes alight with a manic energy that suggested either brilliance or madness, or possibly both. "I've got it," Jester declared, waving a hand as if shooing away the doubts clinging to the air like space dust. "We weaponize humor," Scrimshaw raised an eyebrow. "Weaponize humor? You mean like arming ourselves with whoopee cushions and lethal puns?" No, Jester said, dismissing the sarcasm with a wave. "We turn laughter into a psychological weapon. Confuse them, baffle them, leave them so disoriented they can't tell their blasters from their backsides." Barnacle leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "And how exactly do we do that?" "Simple," Jester replied, pacing like a circus ringmaster strategizing his grand finale. "We plant the seeds of chaos. Imagine an entire Glordock fleet brought to its knees by a well-timed knock-knock joke." Scrimshaw rubbed his chin, the plan taking root in his mind. "So we distract them with comedy while we find a way to outmaneuver them." "Exactly," Jester exclaimed, his enthusiasm infectious even in the face of looming interstellar doom. "We use our greatest weapon, the unpredictability of human humor. They'll never see it coming." Sparks nodded, finally looking up from her toaster. "It's crazy enough to work, or get us all killed." "But hey, I'm in," Reese shrugged, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Let's do it. Worst-case scenario, we go down in history as the galaxy's funniest casualties." With Jester's plan in place, the crew set to work, a frenzy of activity that turned the laughing Gull into a hive of creativity and desperation. They scoured the ship for any and all comedic resources, from ancient joke books to outdated sitcom recordings, compiling them into a veritable arsenal of absurdity. Scrimshaw coordinated the efforts, his usual cynicism tempered by a growing sense of purpose. This was their shot, a chance to turn the tide and show the universe that humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology or firepower, but its ability to laugh in the face of adversity. As the crew worked, they bantered and joked, their camaraderie a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. They were a ragtag bunch, held together by little more than duct tape and determination, but they had something no alien armada could ever replicate, a shared understanding of the absurdity of existence. "Grease, how's that sound system coming?" Scrimshaw called, striding through the mess hall where cables snaked across the floor like metallic vines. Grease was hunched over a speaker that had seen better days, a screwdriver clenched between his teeth. "Well, it won't win any awards for clarity, but it'll do the job, as long as the job doesn't involve anything more complicated than projected chaos." "Good enough," Scrimshaw muttered, moving on to where Barnacle was assembling a collection of props that ranged from rubber chickens to fake mustaches. "We're really doing this," Barnacle said, shaking his head with a grin. "Can you imagine the Glordock's faces when we hit them with a tidal wave of human hilarity?" "I can, and it's glorious," Scrimshaw replied, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "Let's hope they have a sense of humor hidden under all that stoicism." Meanwhile, in the heart of darkness, an engine room that was more grease than engine, Sparks and Jester were putting the finishing touches on what Jester had dubbed the laughter bomb. It was a crude device cobbled together from spare parts and raw ingenuity, designed to broadcast a cacophony of sound waves capable of inciting chaos. "You really think this thing will work?" Sparks asked, eyeing the contraption with skepticism. Jester grinned, his confidence unwavering. "It'll either be the greatest triumph of tactical comedy or the universe's most spectacular failure. Either way, we're making history." With their preparations complete, the crew gathered on the bridge, the weight of their mission settling over them like a heavy cloak. This was it, The moment when they would put everything on the line for a chance to outwit an enemy that outgunned and outnumbered them. Scrimshaw stood at the helm, his gaze sweeping over his crew. They were a motley assortment of misfits, each with their own quirks and flaws, but they were his misfits, and he wouldn't trade them for all the fleets in the galaxy. "Ready to show these Glordocs what humans are made of?" he asked, his voice carrying a note of challenge. "We're ready," Sparks replied, the determination in her eyes mirrored by the rest of the crew. With a nod, Scrimshaw activated the ship's comms, broadcasting their signal towards the Glordoc fleet. The Laughing Gull hummed with anticipation, its patched-up systems straining under the weight of the moment. As the signal reached its target, Jester triggered the laughter bomb, setting off a chain of sound waves that rippled through space with all the subtlety of a cosmic fart. The Glordoc response was immediate and bewildering. Their ships faltered, caught off guard by the unexpected assault of humor. Confusion rippled through their ranks, their formations unraveling like a poorly timed punchline. Back aboard the Laughing Gull, the crew watched the chaos unfold with a mix of awe and disbelief. The Glordocs, so confident in their superiority, were stumbling over their own feet, their disciplined ranks descending into disorder. "By the stars, it's actually working," Grease breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "Of course it is," Jester replied, smug satisfaction radiating from him like the glow of a dying sun. Never underestimate the power of a good joke. As the Glordoc fleet floundered, Scrimshaw seized the opportunity, guiding the Laughing Gull into evasive maneuvers that defied logic and reason. They weaved through the chaos, their course as unpredictable as the humor that had brought them this far. For the first time since their mission had begun, the crew felt a glimmer of hope. They were outmatched and outgunned, but they had something the Glordocs could never understand, a shared laughter that bound them together and gave them strength. In the end, it wasn't the might of their technology or the precision of their tactics that turned the tide. It was the simple, undeniable truth that humor was humanity's greatest weapon. It was chaotic and unpredictable, a force that transcended logic and reason. With the Glordocs in disarray, the Laughing Gull made its escape, the ship's engines roaring to life with a sound that could have been mistaken for laughter itself. As they sped away from the chaos they had wrought, the crew gathered on the bridge, the tension of the moment giving way to a sense of triumph. They had done the impossible, using humor as their shield and sword. Scrimshaw looked around at his crew, a grin breaking through his usual cynicism. "Well, folks, I think we've proven that laughter really is the best defense," Barnacle chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Or at least the most unexpected one." Grease raised his cup in a toast, a mischievous glint in his eye. "To the galaxy's greatest comedians." "May we never lose our sense of humor." Sparks nodded, her expression a mixture of pride and relief. "And may the Glordocs never figure out how we did it." As the Laughing Gull sailed on through the stars, the crew basked in their victory, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had faced the darkness and emerged with their laughter intact. For in the vastness of space, where everything that could go wrong often did, there was no greater weapon than the ability to laugh in the face of the unknown. And as long as they had that, they would always have a fighting chance. The Laughing Gull teetered through space like a drunk stumbling home after last call, engines coughing more than a chain smoker at a marathon. On the bridge, the crew was a picture of organized chaos, which was an improvement over their usual chaos without the organization. Sparks had her feet up on the console, fiddling with a piece of wiring that might have once been part of the life support system. No one was quite sure. "Is it bad that I'm starting to miss the old-fashioned ways of warfare?" Barnacle mused, leaning back in his chair. "You know, when victory was decided by who had the bigger stick and not the better joke." "Yeah, well, sticks don't work so well in zero gravity," Grease replied, jabbing a thumb at the cluster of red blips on the radar. "So let's hope the Glordocs have a sense of humor. And here I thought our comedy night was just an excuse for you to play your kazoo solo," Sparks quipped, smirking. Hey, some of us have hidden talents, Grease shot back. Captain Scrimshaw stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the approaching Glordock fleet like a gambler eyeing his last chip. It was time to go all in. He tapped the comms, his voice crackling through the ship's barely functional speakers. All right, crew, showtime. Let's give these Glordocks a performance they'll never forget. Jester, the mastermind behind their madcap plan, was practically vibrating with excitement. Remember, folks, timing is everything. A knock-knock joke delivered too early could spell disaster. Just like your last date, Barnacle said, earning a chorus of chuckles. With the push of a button that might have been held together by duct tape and hope, the laughing Gull's speakers roared to life, sending sound waves rippling through the vacuum of space. The Glordock ships, sleek and intimidating, hesitated in their advance, momentarily confused by the cacophony assaulting their senses. "What's a Glordock's favorite game?" the recorded voice echoed, a deadpan delivery that could have rivaled a disgruntled toaster. "Hide and seek, but they always lose because they can't handle the punchline." The Glordock ships faltered, their formations breaking as they tried to process the alien concept of humor. It was as if they'd suddenly realized their pants were around their ankles, and in space, that's a hell of a predicament. "By the black holes of Betelgeuse, it's working," Sparks exclaimed, watching the radar as the Glordock ships twirled in confusion. "The irony of using laughter to scare them off isn't lost on me," Barnacle said, shaking his head. "Who'd have thought we'd win a war by quoting stand-up routines?" Scrimshaw nodded, his lips twitching. "Keep it up. Let's see if we can get them to retreat before they figure out how to turn their weapons back on." The Laughing Gull continued its comedic assault, deploying a barrage of jokes that ran the gamut from puns to slapstick sound effects. The Glordock ships, once a menacing wave of aggression, now looked more like a school of fish trying to avoid a particularly persistent dolphin. "Why did the Glordock cross the galaxy?" the recording continued. "To find out if the chicken ever made it to the other side," Sparks snorted. "I can't believe we're betting our lives on bad jokes." "Well, you can thank Jester for his impeccable taste in comedy," Grease replied, his tone drier than a Martian desert. Jester, still riding the high of their apparent success, gestured theatrically as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "You see, humor is like a universal translator. Sure, it might not make sense to them, but it disrupts their equilibrium. They're too busy trying to understand why the chicken crossed the road to fire at us." The Glordock ships began to retreat, their armada unraveling under the relentless assault of human absurdity. Their discipline crumbled as they turned tail, fleeing from the inexplicable chaos they couldn't comprehend. Back on the Laughing Gull, the crew erupted into cheers, the tension that had gripped them finally breaking like a brittle old rubber band. They had done it, turned back an enemy fleet with nothing more than laughter and lunacy. Scrimshaw leaned against the helm, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Well, folks, I think it's safe to say we've achieved a tactical first. We might even get a medal out of this, one made of rubber with a squeaky horn attached." "Can I put professional comedian on my resume now?" Grease asked, a broad grin stretching his face. "As long as you don't mention the kazoo," Barnacle replied, nudging him. The ship's comms crackled again, this time emitting a series of harsh clicks and whistles, the Glordock equivalent of a white flag. Commander Zoltran's image flickered onto the ancient monitor, his normally stoic features twisted in confusion. "Humans," Zoltran began, his voice strained with the effort of comprehending their tactics, "we concede, your humor, it is overwhelming." Jester couldn't resist. "Overwhelming, that's just the warm-up act." Zoltran's eyes shifted, uncertain whether he should be relieved or more concerned. "We have no defense against such unpredictability. We request a truce." Scrimshaw tilted his head, considering the offer. "A truce, huh? What do you think, crew? Should we let them off easy or make them sit through my stand-up routine?" There was a chorus of groans, and Sparks shook her head. "I'd rather face their blasters, thanks." "We'll take the truce," Scrimshaw said, turning back to the monitor. "But on one condition. You have to agree to a comedy exchange program. We'll teach you the fine art of the knock-knock joke, and in return, you don't vaporize us." Zoltran nodded, a gesture that suggested both acquiescence and a profound relief at avoiding further exposure to human humor. "Agreed. We will learn your strange ways." As the comms cut off, the crew of the Laughing Gull burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the ship like a triumphant anthem. They had done the impossible and proven that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, laughter could light the way. Scrimshaw looked around at his crew, misfits and mavericks all, bound together by equal parts insanity and ingenuity. "You know," he said, his voice tinged with pride, "this is only the beginning. If we've learned anything today, it's that the universe is a lot less scary when you're laughing, and a lot more likely to leave you alone if they think you're crazy," Sparks added, still chuckling. Barnacle raised an imaginary glass. "To the Laughing Gull. May we always find humor in the madness." The crew echoed the toast, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had faced down the abyss and come out grinning. As long as they had each other, a few good jokes, and a ship that somehow defied the odds, they knew they'd be all right. As the Laughing Gull sailed onward, the stars stretched out before them like an endless punchline, and they were more than ready for whatever cosmic humor the universe had in store. The Laughing Gull floated through space, a run-down cosmic pub on its final call, but with a crew that had just pulled off a comedic coup. The ship's interior was alive with a mix of disbelief and euphoria, like finding out your hangover cured itself by turning into a day off. Captain Scrimshaw leaned back in his chair, his mind doing cartwheels over their improbable victory against the Glordock fleet. "Can you believe it?" Grease said, plopping into a nearby chair, greasy fingers leaving a welcome smudge on the armrest. "We just sent an alien armada running with jokes even a dad would be embarrassed to tell." "Yeah, I had no idea interstellar diplomacy involved so much improv," Sparks chimed in, still poking at the wiring, which had held together through nothing short of pure spite. "Maybe next time we can scare them off with a knock-knock joke contest." Scrimshaw let out a dry chuckle. "Well, they always said laughter was the best medicine. Turns out it's also a pretty damned effective weapon when you're fresh out of torpedoes." Barnacle, with a wry grin, leaned against the bulkhead, still processing their new reality. "You think we could sell this tactic to other ships, or would we just be laughed off stage?" "Hey," Jester interjected, rubbing his hands together with a conspiratorial glint in his eyes, "we could start a side hustle. Jokes for jettisoning enemies. We could even undercut those military contractors. They'll hate us more than the Glordocks do." "Speaking of which," Grease said, reaching for a mystery meat sandwich that had been hiding in his pocket, "how much you wanna bet the Glordocks are already trying to figure out if they can weaponize humor themselves?" Scrimshaw nodded. "Let them try. By the time they figure out why the chicken crossed the road, we'll be 3 parsecs away and cracking jokes about their mothers." "You know, Captain," Sparks said, looking up from her wiring, "this victory just proves that sometimes, when life gives you lemons, you squeeze them into the eyes of your enemies, and then laugh about it." Scrimshaw raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Never thought I'd hear philosophy from an engine tech, but there you go. Space makes philosophers of us all," Barnacle added with a mock-serious tone. "Or at least bad poets." The crew chuckled, the sound of camaraderie ringing through the Laughing Gull's corridors. It felt like the first genuine laugh they'd shared in ages, a sound more powerful than any laser blast, more precious than gold-pressed latinum. It was the sound of a family, dysfunctional sure, but family nonetheless. "All right, gang," Scrimshaw said, standing up and clapping his hands together. "Let's not get too comfortable. That was one battle, but who knows what the next one will bring?" Reese snorted. "With our luck, probably a pie fight in zero gravity." Jester perked up, inspired. "Hey, let's add that to the playbook. Operation Pie in the Sky." "Meanwhile," Sparks said, pointing a finger at Scrimshaw, "what's next on the agenda, Captain? More comedy nights with interstellar repercussions, or do we get a breather?" Scrimshaw sighed, scratching the back of his neck. "We've earned a breather, but don't get too used to it. The galaxy's a mess, and I doubt it's going to clean itself up, but who knows? Maybe we'll find something more lucrative than saving our skins with slapstick." "Like what?" Barnacle asked. "Stand-up routines on the intergalactic circuit. Don't knock it till you've tried it," Scrimshaw replied with a smirk. "Besides, after today, we've proven we're the funniest thing this side of the Milky Way." The crew erupted with laughter again, a sound as ragged as the ship they called home. In that laughter, there was relief, triumph, and the unspoken acknowledgement that they had each other's backs, no matter how absurd the universe might get. Scrimshaw looked out the viewport at the stars, the endless expanse of the cosmos stretching before them like a stage ready for the next act. "To future adventures," he said, raising an imaginary glass. "And to the Glordox," Barnacle added. "May they never figure out the punchline." Days passed in a blur of maintenance and merriment, the crew patching up the laughing Gull with the same care one might give to a beloved but battered old car. The ship groaned and wheezed, but it had a heart, and that heart was in its people, people who had laughed in the face of annihilation and come out victorious. Scrimshaw found himself in his quarters, staring at the ancient digital calendar, hoping it might offer some sage advice on their next move. It didn't. It just blinked back at him, an unhelpful reminder of dates past due and reports he'd rather not think about. "Hey, Captain," Sparks said as she popped her head in, startling him out of his reverie. "Got a minute? For you I've got two," he replied, gesturing for her to come in. "What's up?" Sparks leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I've been thinking about the whole weaponizing humor thing. Yeah, well, we pulled it off, but it got me wondering. What happens when everyone is in on the joke? What then?" Scrimshaw considered this, tapping his desk absent-mindedly. "That's the nature of innovation, Sparks. You come up with something new and sooner or later someone else figures it out. Then it's back to the drawing board, but that's what keeps us sharp. So we're just supposed to keep coming up with new ways to stay alive. Sounds exhausting." "Welcome to life in space," Scrimshaw said with a lopsided grin. "But here's the thing, we're good at it. Damned good. And together we'll keep finding the next angle, the next punchline," Sparks chuckled. "Guess that means I should start working on my stand-up routine," Scrimshaw laughed. "Just keep the ship running and we'll call it even." Back in the mess hall, the rest of the crew was engaged in a game of cards, the stakes being whatever loose change, bits of wire, and dubious snacks they could scrounge up. Grease was attempting to bluff his way through with a hand that would have made a poker shark cry. "You know," Grease said, looking around at his crew mates, "we should start documenting our adventures. Call it the Laughing Gull Chronicles." Barnacle raised an eyebrow. "Who's gonna read that? And more importantly, why?" "Future generations, obviously," Jester chimed in, grinning. "They'll need something to entertain them while they're stuck on long-haul flights. And to remind them what not to do," Barnacle added dryly. The banter continued, each joke and retort a testament to their shared history, their shared survival. The crew had formed a bond that transcended the usual hardships of space travel and turned them into something more, a family of choice, not blood. Scrimshaw, watching from the doorway, felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. He hadn't set out to lead a band of misfits to galactic fame, but here they were. The Laughing Gull may not have been the fastest or the strongest ship, but it was theirs and it was home. He joined the table, the sense of camaraderie infectious. "All right, what's the game? And who do I have to bribe for a decent hand?" "Bribery won't help you," Grease said, sliding a deck of cards across the table with more flair than necessary. "Luck's got it in for you, Captain." "Tell me something I don't know," Scrimshaw replied, picking up his hand and trying not to grimace. He was pretty sure he'd seen better hands on a clock. As the game continued, the crew's laughter filled the space, a sound that seemed to echo through the very walls of the Laughing Gull. It was a reminder that, despite the odds, they had found their place in a universe that often seemed determined to cast them adrift. "To the Laughing Gull," Scrimshaw said, raising his cards in a mock toast. "And to us poor souls doomed to sail her." Barnacle added, his voice filled with mock seriousness. They all clinked their cards together, a ceremonial gesture that felt fitting in its absurdity. Asterisk after the game, as the crew began to drift into their own routines, some to sleep, others to tinker with the ship, and still others to plot their next comedic masterpiece, Scrimshaw found himself back on the bridge, looking out at the stars. The universe was vast, filled with danger and uncertainty. But it was also filled with potential, with the promise of new experiences and new adventures. As long as they had each other and a sense of humor sharp enough to cut through the darkest of times, they'd be all right. Scrimshaw smiled to himself, a rare moment of peace settling over him. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own hurdles to overcome. But for now, they had laughter in each other, and that was enough. "All right, Laughing Gull," he murmured to the ship, patting the helm affectionately. "Let's see what tomorrow has in store." With that, he turned off the lights, leaving only the distant glow of stars to keep watch over them as the Laughing Gull continued its journey through the cosmos, a beacon of irreverent defiance in a universe that could use a good laugh.